The house on Cedar Lane looked the same from the outside, but inside it, everything had already changed. The day Ethan Walker returned home from school, the air felt heavy, as if the walls were holding their breath. He was 16, old enough to understand loss but too young to know how to live with it. His father, Mark Walker, had died suddenly from a heart attack. One morning he had been a voice calling from the kitchen. By evening, he was a memory. Ethan stood in the doorway with his backpack still on his shoulder, unsure if stepping inside would make the truth permanent. The living room was quiet, too quiet for a house that once echoed with laughter and small arguments over nothing. His mother Laura sat on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than Ethan remembered, like grief had slowly folded her inward. When she saw him, she stood and hugged him, holding on longer than usual. She did not cry. Her strength frightened him more than tears would have. Across the room stood Aunt Rachel. She was Laura's younger sister, only 5 years older. But she carried herself with a calm confidence that felt steady in moments like this. She had arrived the night before, saying she would stay for a few days. Ethan could tell even then that she wasn't planning to leave soon. Rachel gave him a soft smile, the kind that said she understood what he could not put into words. She placed a hand on his shoulder, light but reassuring, as if grounding him in the moment. That evening, the three of them ate dinner together. No one spoke much. The clink of forks against plates sounded too loud. Ethan kept waiting for his father's voice to break the silence, to complain about the food being cold or to ask about school. But the chair at the head of the table stayed empty. Laura stared at it more than once before looking away. Rachel noticed but said nothing. From that night on, the house followed a new rhythm. Laura returned to work at the clinic after only a week, not because she was ready, but because staying home felt unbearable. Rachel took over the things Mark used to do without anyone noticing: grocery shopping, fixing the loose cabinet door, reminding Ethan about homework. She did it quietly without acting like she was replacing anyone. That made it easier to accept her presence. Ethan tried to focus on school, but his thoughts drifted constantly. In class, he would catch himself staring out the window, replaying small moments with his father. At home, he moved carefully, as if sudden noise might shatter what little balance remained. Rachel noticed his silence. Some evenings she sat with him at the kitchen table while he pretended to study, asking simple questions about his day. She didn't push. She listened. That mattered more than advice. Laura, on the other hand, seemed trapped between strength and exhaustion. She smiled when she needed to, but her eyes were always tired. At night, Ethan sometimes heard her crying softly in her room. He never mentioned it. Instead, he tried to be helpful, taking out the trash, cleaning without being asked. He felt an unspoken need to protect her, even though he didn't know how. Weeks turned into months. Rachel was still there. The neighbors began to assume she had moved in for good. In a way, she had. She rearranged the living room slightly, adding warmer lights, opening the curtains more often. The house began to feel alive again, though in a different way. Ethan noticed how Laura leaned on Rachel during quiet moments. How their conversations often stopped when he entered the room. Not because they were hiding something, but because grief had created a language he didn't yet understand. One rainy afternoon, Ethan came home early after practice was canceled. He heard voices in the kitchen, Laura and Rachel talking in low tones. He paused in the hallway, not meaning to listen, but unable to walk away. "I don't know how to do this alone," Laura said, her voice breaking. "You're not alone," Rachel replied. "You don't have to be." Ethan felt something tighten. In his chest, he stepped away before they noticed him. That moment stayed with him, shaping his understanding of family in ways he wouldn't realize until much later, as winter approached. Ethan grew closer to Rachel in small, natural ways. She helped him with college planning, talked to him about life beyond the town, encouraged him to think big. She treated him like someone capable, not fragile. Laura loved him deeply, but her love was heavy with fear of losing him too. Rachel's care felt lighter, like permission to breathe. Ethan didn't think of it as anything strange. He only knew that the house no longer felt empty when Rachel was there. He felt safe between the two women who loved him in different but equally powerful ways. He belonged to them, and they belonged to him, bound together by loss and loyalty. Late one night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The rain tapped softly against the window. He wondered if life would always feel like this, balanced on the edge of sadness and comfort. He didn't know that this was only the beginning of a story that would follow him into adulthood, shaping his ideas of love, boundaries, and emotional connection. For now, he only knew one thing. The house on Cedar Lane held more than grief. It held a quiet, complicated love that was slowly rewriting all their lives. Ethan's life shifted again the moment he stepped into his senior year of high school. The house on Cedar Lane, once heavy with grief, had begun to feel like a place of quiet stability. Laura returned to work fully, and Rachel stayed nearby. Keeping the home steady, Ethan carried himself differently now. All were aware, yet still shaped by the absence of his father. He learned to move between the two worlds of the house, the structured, cautious world of his mother and the warm, freeing presence of his aunt. Each offered him a sense of belonging, but in different ways. Rachel was easy to talk to. She never judged when Ethan shared a frustration or a dream. She encouraged him to explore beyond the limits he had set for himself, to think about college, friends, and life beyond the small town. Laura, on the other hand, loved quietly, with patience mixed with worry. She checked his assignments, reminded him of deadlines, and hugged him with a protective intensity. Ethan felt both the weight and the comfort of their love. He didn't realize it then, but it was shaping his understanding of trust and emotional connection. High school brought new challenges. Classes were harder, friends came and went, and Ethan had to figure out who he was outside the house. He joined the debate team and the school newspaper, partly because Rachel had encouraged him to be more social, and partly because he wanted to create space for himself. Laura noticed the change in him, but often felt powerless to guide him now. She had raised him through his early years of grief, and now it was time for him to stretch beyond her care. Ethan noticed the subtle ways his mother and aunt supported him differently. Laura provided structure, keeping him grounded. Rachel offered perspective, showing him what freedom felt like without chaos. Together, they created balance in a life that had once felt fragile. Sometimes he would sit in the living room with both of them, listening to quiet laughter or sharing a story from school, and he felt a strange mix of gratitude and confusion. He loved them both deeply, but he couldn't always explain why their presence affected him so profoundly. As his senior year progressed, Ethan met Claire, a journalism student who had come to his town for a community project. She was curious, thoughtful, and bright, and her presence stirred emotions Ethan didn't expect. Talking to her reminded him of the excitement of possibility and growth, but it also reminded him of the comfort he felt at home, between his mother's steady love and his aunt's gentle guidance. He realized for the first time that he was capable of caring deeply for more than one person, but in different ways. It was a confusing discovery, and one that left him both anxious and exhilarated. At home, small routines carried more meaning. Rachel would wake early and make tea, quietly placing it on Ethan's desk before he got up. Laura would linger at the breakfast table, smiling but visibly worried about his future. Every gesture, no matter how small, reinforced Ethan's sense of being loved and supported. Sometimes he noticed that the two women shared subtle glances that seemed to communicate more than words ever could. He didn't understand it fully at the time, but he knew he was part of something larger, something built from care, sacrifice, and unspoken loyalty. Ethan's understanding of family continued to grow when he began helping Rachel with small projects around the house. Fixing the fence, painting a room, organizing old photo albums. These tasks gave him a sense of responsibility, but also connection. Rachel would tell stories about her younger days, her voice animated with humor and warmth, and Ethan felt his world expand. Laura would smile from the doorway, watching him with pride and relief. Each day he learned lessons in patience, empathy, and the quiet strength of women who had carried him through loss. The summer before college was particularly intense. Ethan spent hours reflecting on what he wanted in life, who he wanted to be, and how he could honor the people who had raised him. Laura suggested he focus on scholarship applications, while Rachel encouraged him to explore internships and creative opportunities. Their support pulled him in multiple directions, but it also reminded him that love could be both protective and liberating. He began to see clearly that his connection with them was not about control or dependency, was about respect, trust, and shared history. One evening, while working on a college essay, Ethan overheard a quiet conversation between Laura and Rachel. They were discussing him not in concern or fear, but in amazement at how he had grown. "He's becoming his own person," Rachel said softly. Laura nodded, a mixture of pride and sadness in her eyes. "He is," she agreed, "and we did what we could to give him roots strong enough to fly." Ethan stayed where he was, hidden in the doorway, feeling a surge of gratitude and warmth. That moment helped him understand how deeply intertwined their lives had become, not in dependency, but in love that could never be replaced. Claire visited again in late summer, this time to interview Ethan for a local article about young writers. Sitting across from her in the sunlit library, he noticed how easy it was to speak, how different it felt from the home where he had grown up. Yet, even as he laughed and shared ideas with her, the images of Laura and Rachel stayed with him. He realized that love could exist in multiple forms, each meaningful and necessary, and that the strongest bonds were those built on respect and care, not obligation. By the time autumn arrived, Ethan's preparations for college were in full swing. Packing boxes, signing forms, and saying tentative goodbyes brought mixed emotions. Laura cried once during a quiet moment, letting Ethan hug her with no words needed. Rachel gave him practical advice with her usual calm, but when he left, she squeezed his hand a little longer than normal. Ethan understood in a deep, unspoken way that leaving home was not about detachment. It was about honoring what they had built together, while stepping into his own life. Through all these changes, Ethan discovered that the love he felt for his mother and aunt was complex, layered, and enduring. It was not romantic, not inappropriate, but deeply emotional, built from loss, support, and shared life experiences. Laura provided grounding, protection, and unwavering loyalty. Rachel offered freedom, encouragement, and emotional guidance. Together, they had shaped him into someone capable of facing the world with confidence, compassion, and resilience. The end of high school was bittersweet. Ethan stood at the doorway of the house on Cedar Lane one last time before leaving for college. He looked back at Laura and Rachel, each offering a smile that carried everything words could not. He realized then that he had grown up surrounded by love, but also that love required understanding, boundaries, and trust. His future with Claire and his life beyond the house would be different, but the lessons from Laura and Rachel would remain with him forever. Ethan stepped outside, feeling the crisp autumn air on his face. He carried his backpack and his memories with equal weight. The house, though quieter, had prepared him for the world. The women who had loved him unconditionally had given him roots and wings at the same time. And in that quiet emotional balance, Ethan understood that while the world beyond awaited him, a part of him would always belong to the house and to the women who had shaped his heart.